So it's Thursday, and Thursday is probably my favorite day in Evony because on Thursdays we get the results of that week's Alliance Duel. And the Alliance Duel is one of my favorites because you're able to do essentially PvP. Like everybody in your alliance can participate in this giant PvP match without any repercussions. Your troops aren't really going to die. You're not going to lose any resources. You're just going to see how well your PvP march can do against somebody else's, and you're going to get paired up against random alliances and random servers that they could be huge, they could be small, they could be around your size. It's just interesting to see the kind of results, and I love looking at them and doing analysis on them. So if you look here, you can see that TTF, that's our alliance, we did third place. It's pretty good. I was hoping that we would end up in second because we had two alliances that were much smaller, so I figured we were going to win that one. One that was much bigger, figured we were going to lose that one, and two that were comparable, and I was hoping that we could take both of those, but instead we just took one of those two. Okay, so if we look at the battle logs, if I go to TTF, so this will show you all the results for when you were attacking, and then if you look at each individual one, then you can see the one where you were defending. But right now I just want to look at the attacking ones. So this first one, you can see their average power was 2 billion, our average power was 2 billion, and theirs was 1.4 billion. So this is one of the ones that we had a pretty good advantage in it. But if we go ahead and look at that, so you can see we won the first line here without any problem. I want to look at this right line, which is a little bit more contested. So one of the matchups that I want to look at here is this one here. So we have TO with 65 million against Suplad, which has 128 million. And the one with 128 million won, and that's expected. But if you go in here and look at the details, it tells a little bit different story. So you can see that TO, he got killed, but he did 107.5 million power loss to the opponent. So even though he lost, he devastated this opponent. And what that will do is you can see that in the next line, our next participant was able to take Suplad, who was down to 20 million, and just smash him because she had a great advantage with the power in her line. Whereas if TO had battled here and hardly done any damage, Suplad still would have had maybe over 100 million and probably would have devastated Evergreen. And so that's one of the things to think about, is that even when you are just sending a line and you figure you're going to go against somebody much bigger, even if you lose, you could still be helping your team out. So we ended up with a victory in here, even though we started losing a bunch here. But once TO had that great attack against Suplad, you can see we were able to take the rest of the line without a problem. And, well, actually, I say without a problem, but if we go ahead and... So the Ev against Suplad, that one wasn't anything really special because TO had done the damage. But if you look at the next one, where Mount Evergreen had 64.9 versus the 85.5, and she still won. And so if we go ahead and look at that, we can see that even then, she hardly lost anybody. She didn't even lose 1 million worth of power. And if we scroll down and look to see what might have happened here, so you can see that they sent Li Jing, which is a decent mounted general, but only boosts attack, so it's not that great, and Washington Prime, who's also decent, but Washington Prime didn't have much power associated with it here, at least didn't have the stars associated with it. So they were losing some abilities there. And if you go ahead and look in the detail, so I know that Ev has a layered ranged march, which is one of the best that you can send from my analysis. And you can see the defender, all he did was send mounted troops, just one layer of mounted troops. And so it's evident to me that something like this is probably a player who does a lot of combat against monsters. And so they're comfortable just sending their monster march into this, which is a PvP competition. And the problem is when you send a monster march against a PvP march, the monster march is often going to get crushed. Now, due to the lack of layers are very important in PvC, so they're going to get crushed because of that. And just because the mounted against the ranged has an advantage over mounted in general, so that's going to do it as well. And so you can see that because of that, Mount Evergreen didn't really lose much power, and so was able to do the same thing against the next opponent, even the next opponent was bigger. And then after that, their opponents had much smaller power, and so our participants with smaller power were able to take them on and defeat them. And so that's why we were able to get the victory in that line. And so now if I look at a different line, so for this SOS, so you can see we have 2 billion, they had 2.2 billion. So it was pretty close in power. But the problem is, so our top 3 people in this line all sent layered ranged marches. And the problem is they sent one with layered ground. And the ground, all things being equal, will crush the ranged. And that's what happened here. So we had 3 good marches, but they had, this guy just had one good ground march. And, it was also bigger in power than, Earl Koenig was 178 versus 208. So, definitely had the advantage there. But then we hardly did any damage to them. And they were able to keep that power, and we only had 110 and 103 power coming after them. But if we had, say, a mounted march second with the same power, it could have done a lot of damage against him, and that could have changed the whole face of this line. But as it was, we just got run over 1, 2, 3 by the same type of by the ground march, just going through 3 different ranged marches. So that shows you that putting some variety, especially at the top, might be a good thing, because if you lose the first one, you might win the second one because you might have the advantage there, or at least have the same type of march against them. And similarly, if you are able to beat them, then you don't know what's going to come next. But the problem is when you get beat, you don't want the same march going 3 times against your 3 guys that are going to be defeated against it. And finally, one that I wanted to look at here was in the 24U. So you can see 3.8 billion, we only had 2 billion. So they're almost twice as big. So we were expecting to lose big here. And you can see here, this line got crushed. This line got pretty much crushed, except for down here. So this is what I wanted to look at here. So you can see that Blee at 56.5 against Pappy Van at 120. But you can see that Pappy Van went from 120 down to 79. And so this is another instance, like I said before, where the first guy really softened him up and allowed the second one to have an upset victory, because the 36 versus 79, so it's more than twice as big, yet still got the victory. And let me see here. So this was another situation with Blee and Rogue Kangaroo. Rogue Kangaroo happens to be my alt, where this time he was up against a $272 million player. So like 5 times his size. And so, did a significant amount of damage, did 70 million worth of damage to him. But then Rogue Kangaroo comes around with this measly 36 million. So 36 million with a layered ranged march versus this big guy with 202 million and just wipes him out. And so if you look here, you can see the general. So Aethelflaed is a great general against monsters, sucks in PvP, does nothing in PvP. And so that's not something you want to see. Once again, this player sent just a monster march, just one single layer of mounted troops, which my layered ranged troops, even though I didn't have many of them, I only had 93,000 R13s, only 218,000 R12s, but just ripped through that single layer of mounted, even though, 6 times my size. So you can see that when you're doing things for the Alliance Duel, send a layered march, send a PvP march. Use generals that are good against PvP and not just good against monsters. And you're going to have much better results. All right. So good luck next week in your Alliance Duel.